There is a moment most people know, but almost nobody talks about. You wake up in the morning with a plan. A real plan. You have told yourself the night before that today is different. That today you will finally sit down and do the work that matters. Finish what you started. Begin what you have been avoiding for weeks. You feel it. A flicker of determination. A quiet fire in your chest that says this time will be different. And then something shifts. You pick up your phone, just for a moment, just to check one thing, just to see what you missed while you were asleep. One notification leads to another. One video leads to the next. One scroll becomes 20 minutes, then 40, then an hour gone before you have even stood up from your bed. And when you finally close the screen and look at the day ahead of you, that fire is gone. The work is still there, waiting, heavy, demanding, but you feel nothing toward it. Not resistance exactly. Something worse than resistance. Numbness. A deep, hollow emptiness where your motivation used to be. And in that moment, almost every person on earth does the same thing. They blame themselves. They call themselves lazy. They say they lack discipline, lack willpower, lack the character that successful people must surely have in abundance. They carry that shame through the rest of the day, half working, half distracted, going to sleep that night with the quiet weight of another wasted day pressing down on them. And tomorrow the cycle begins again. If any part of this sounds familiar, then what you are about to hear will change the way you understand yourself, your brain, and your potential for the rest of your life. Because the story you have been telling yourself about why you procrastinate is not just wrong. It is the very thing keeping you stuck. Procrastination is not a character flaw. It is not a sign that you are weak, undisciplined, or somehow less capable than the people around you who seem to get things done with ease. It is a neurological condition, a measurable, explainable, and most importantly, a fixable pattern happening inside your brain at the chemical level. And once you understand what is actually going on beneath the surface, you will never look at your own struggles the same way again. The key to all of it, the reason you put things off, the reason important work feels unbearable, the reason you reach for distraction even when you desperately want to focus, comes down to a single molecule. Dopamine. This chemical messenger, produced deep within the brain, is responsible for something far more powerful than pleasure. It is the engine of motivation itself. It is the force that makes you move toward things, that makes effort feel worthwhile, that transforms a difficult task into something your brain is willing to pursue. When your dopamine system is healthy and balanced, hard work feels challenging but meaningful. Goals feel worth chasing. Discomfort feels temporary. But when your dopamine system is dysregulated, when it has been overstimulated, overtaxed, and thrown out of its natural rhythm, everything changes. Suddenly, low-stimulation activities feel not just boring but genuinely painful. Your brain, calibrated to the peaks of social media, fast content, and instant reward, looks at a quiet hour of focused work and recoils. It cannot find the signal. It cannot generate the drive. And so you avoid. Not because you are lazy, because your brain has been conditioned to need more than reality can deliver. This is the insight that Dr. Mindful Shift has dedicated years to exploring, articulating, and bringing to the millions of people who are suffering through this cycle without understanding its cause. The problem is not your schedule. The problem is not your to-do list, or your morning routine, or your lack of the right productivity app. The problem is that your brain's reward threshold has been quietly elevated by the relentless stimulation of modern digital life, and no amount of willpower can override a chemical imbalance. Willpower is a finite resource. It depletes. It collapses under pressure. And building your entire strategy for productivity on a foundation of willpower alone is like trying to fill a bathtub without first plugging the drain. You can work as hard as you want, but if the underlying neurological problem is still there, the results will always disappoint you. This is not a pessimistic message. It is a liberating one. Because if the problem has a biological cause, it also has a biological solution. And that solution, the one that works not just for a day or a week, but permanently, begins with something called a dopamine detox. Not a trendy wellness experiment. Not a social media fast for the sake of aesthetic minimalism. A real, structured, science-backed protocol designed to lower your brain's stimulation baseline, restore its natural sensitivity to reward, and reawaken the deep, durable motivation that every human being is born with. The path back to yourself, back to your focus, back to the version of you that can sit with difficulty and still keep going. That path is real. And it starts with understanding exactly what has happened inside your mind and precisely what it will take to repair it. What comes next will show you both. Here is where most conversations about productivity stop. They tell you the problem, they name the enemy, and then they hand you a list of tips and send you on your way. But understanding dopamine dysregulation at the surface level is not enough. You need to go deeper. You need to understand what is actually happening inside your brain on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon when you sit down to work and feel absolutely nothing. No drive, no momentum, no sense that any of it matters. Because that feeling is not random. It is not mysterious. It is a precise, predictable consequence of something your brain has been trained to expect. Every time you pick up your phone and scroll, every time you click on a video before your mind has had a moment of silence, every time you chase the next notification before the last one has even settled, your brain releases a small surge of dopamine. And your brain, like any intelligent system, takes notes. It registers what kind of stimulation produced that surge. It adjusts its expectations accordingly. Over days, weeks, and months of this pattern, your brain begins to recalibrate its baseline. The threshold required to feel motivated, to feel interested, to feel that something is worth pursuing, that threshold rises. Quietly, invisibly, until one day you sit in front of the work that once excited you, the project that once felt meaningful, the goal you once burned for, and you feel nothing but a dull, aching resistance. Your brain is not broken. It is simply waiting for a level of stimulation that ordinary life and ordinary work can no longer provide. And that waiting, that gap between what your brain expects and what reality offers, is the true face of procrastination. Now here is the part that most people are not prepared to hear. The detox, the real reset, is uncomfortable in a way that no one fully warns you about. When you begin removing high-stimulation habits from your daily life, your brain does not immediately reward you with clarity and focus and a sudden love of hard work. That is not how neurological recalibration works. In the first hours and days of a genuine dopamine detox, something almost alarming happens. The silence feels unbearable. The stillness feels threatening. Your mind, stripped of its usual flood of input, begins to reach frantically for something, anything, to fill the void. Anxiety rises. Restlessness sets in. Thoughts become louder, more chaotic, more insistent. You will feel, with a certainty that is almost physical, that you are wasting time, that nothing is happening, that this quiet is somehow dangerous. And this is the moment, this precise, uncomfortable, disorienting moment, that determines everything. Because what you are feeling is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that something is finally right. That restlessness, that discomfort, that grasping quality of a mind suddenly deprived of overstimulation, that is your brain beginning to recalibrate. That is the neurological equivalent of the moment before the dawn. And the people who push through it, who sit with that discomfort instead of escaping back into their screens and distractions, are the ones who discover something extraordinary waiting on the other side. This is precisely the crossroads that Dr. Mindful Shift describes as the most critical and most misunderstood phase of the entire process. It is not the beginning of the detox that challenges people the most. It is this middle passage, this valley of discomfort between the overstimulated life you are leaving and the recalibrated life you are moving toward, that separates the people who transform from the people who retreat. And the tragedy is that most people retreat not because they are weak, but because no one told them this valley was coming. No one told them that feeling worse before you feel better is not a failure signal. It is a healing signal. No one told them that the brain's protest against silence is actually proof that the reset is working, that the old patterns are being disrupted, that new neural pathways are beginning to form in their place. And so they stop. They go back to the scroll, back to the noise, back to the comfortable numbness of a life lived at maximum stimulation. And they tell themselves that the detox did not work, that they are simply not the kind of person who can change, that their procrastination is permanent and fixed and part of who they are. But none of that is true. The only thing that happened is that they stopped at exactly the wrong moment. They were standing at the door of something genuinely transformative, and they turned back because the hallway was dark. What you need to know, what you need to carry with you through that darkness, is that the room on the other side is real. The focus is real. The motivation is real. The version of you that can sit with a difficult task and not only endure it, but find meaning in it. That version of you is not a fantasy. It is your brain in its natural, uncontaminated, fully functioning state. And the protocol that will take you there is not complicated. It is not extreme. It does not require you to become a monk or abandon modern life entirely. It requires something far simpler and far more demanding than that. It requires you to understand exactly what your brain needs in exactly the right sequence, and then to give it that, consistently, patiently, and with the knowledge that every uncomfortable moment is moving you closer to the person you are trying to become. The path forward is coming, and it is closer than you think. The protocol begins not with action, but with awareness. This is the step that most productivity systems skip entirely, and it is the reason most productivity systems ultimately fail. Before you can reset your dopamine system, you need to understand exactly what is feeding it. For the next 24 hours, before you change anything, before you eliminate anything, simply observe. Notice every moment you reach for your phone without a conscious reason. Notice every time you open an app not because you intended to, but because your hand moved there automatically. Notice every time silence makes you uncomfortable enough to fill it with noise. Notice every time you are in the middle of a task and your attention drifts towards something faster, brighter, and easier. Do not judge any of it. Do not shame yourself for what you find. Just watch. Because what you are mapping in those 24 hours is the precise architecture of your overstimulation, the exact habits, the exact triggers, the exact moments in your day where your dopamine system is being fed in ways that are slowly destroying your capacity for deep, meaningful work. That map is not a list of your failures. It is the blueprint for your recovery. And once you have it clearly in front of you, the reset can begin in earnest. The first phase of the actual detox lasts 72 hours, 3 days. During this window, you remove the highest stimulation inputs from your environment as completely as you can manage. Social media goes dark. Short-form video content stops entirely. Music with lyrics is replaced with silence or ambient sound. News consumption is paused. The goal is not punishment. The goal is contrast. You are giving your brain its first genuine experience of a lower stimulation environment so that it can begin the process of recalibrating what normal actually feels like. During these 72 hours, you replace the removed stimulation with activities that produce a slower, quieter, more sustainable form of engagement. Walking without headphones, reading physical books, writing by hand, sitting with your thoughts long enough to actually hear them, cooking a meal from scratch, having a real conversation with another human being without a screen between you. None of these activities will feel as immediately rewarding as scrolling. That is exactly the point. Your brain needs to relearn how to find value in low stimulation experience. It needs to rebuild its sensitivity to the quieter rewards that meaningful work delivers. And it cannot do that while it is still being flooded with artificial peaks. These 3 days will be uncomfortable. They will also be among the most clarifying days you have experienced in years. Because when the noise stops, something else begins to emerge. A quieter signal. A deeper sense of what you actually want, what you actually value, what kind of life you are actually trying to build. That signal has always been there. It has simply been drowned out. The second phase begins on day 4 and extends across the following 3 weeks. This is the integration phase, and it is where the real neurological rewiring takes place. Each morning, before you touch any screen, you spend the first 30 minutes of your day in a state of intentional low stimulation. This might be meditation. It might be journaling. It might be a slow walk outside in natural light. What matters is not the specific activity, but the principle behind it. You are training your brain to begin each day from a place of calm rather than stimulation, from a place of internal orientation rather than external input. This single habit, practiced consistently over 3 weeks, does something measurable to your dopamine system. It lowers your baseline need for stimulation. It begins to restore the brain's natural sensitivity to reward. And it creates a window of genuine focus at the start of each day, during which meaningful work becomes not just possible, but almost effortless. This is the window that Dr. Mindful Shift identifies as the most valuable real estate in your entire day. Not because of what the clock says, but because of what your brain chemistry is doing in those first uncontaminated hours of waking life. Protect that window. Guard it the way you would guard anything genuinely precious. Because what happens inside it will determine the quality and direction of everything that follows. As the weeks progress, something begins to shift in a way that is difficult to describe but impossible to miss. The tasks that once felt unbearable start to feel approachable. The work that once required an hour of avoidance before a reluctant start begins to draw you in naturally. The goals that once felt distant and abstract begin to feel connected to your daily actions in a way that creates genuine momentum. This is not motivation in the shallow, temporary sense of the word, the kind that comes from a powerful speech or an inspiring video and disappears by the following afternoon. This is the deep, steady, self-replenishing drive that comes from a brain operating in its natural state. This is what you are always capable of. This is what was always waiting beneath the noise. Procrastination was never your identity. It was a symptom. And symptoms, when you treat the right cause with the right solution, resolve. The version of you that does the work, that keeps the promises you make to yourself, that builds something real and lasting from the hours of your one extraordinary life. That version is not out of reach. It is not reserved for other people. It is you, with a recalibrated brain, a quieter environment, and the knowledge that every single day of consistent effort is compounding into something greater than you can currently see. Start the detox. Trust the process. And never stop moving forward. If you are benefiting from our topics, please subscribe, like, and turn on the bell notification so you can see our new videos early.